Principal Horn of the Berkeley Symphony, and this is my instrument. Many of you probably refer to this as a French horn, but we musicians all call it simply the horn. The term French horn is a British invention and was used in the 19th and early 20th century in England to distinguish the style of horn that they used from the German horn, which had a larger, darker sound. The British players, most of them used instruments from France, which had a distinctive quality to them, and so they identified the instrument as a French horn. But wherever they come from, they're simply called horn, in whatever language is applicable. The horn got its start in the orchestra over 300 years ago when it was first used in its early form of the hunting horn as background music for hunting scenes in early operas in the 17th century. Eventually, by the middle of the 18th century, it was brought into orchestras, and you hear it in Bach and Handel and Vivaldi orchestral pieces. By the middle of the 18th century, it was discovered that the tones in between the open tones of the horn could be achieved by the use of the hand in the bell, and that's why my instrument is the only instrument in the orchestra that faces backwards. I will demonstrate that in a minute. Without the use of these valves here, which are a 19th century invention, the horn is capable of only playing certain notes, like a bugle. So the only way to get the notes in between is to change the length of the horn, and that's what these valves do. But in the middle of the 18th century, it was discovered that by putting the hand in the bell in certain places, you could get some of the notes in between. So instead of just, I can go. Let me turn around and I'll show you what I did. You might be familiar with the Mozart horn concertos, and they were written for a horn player who had no valves on his instrument and used his hand to achieve the pitches in between the open tones. Since then, of course, the horn has become very prominent in symphonic literature of the 19th and 20th centuries. And many people don't realize that the horn section is usually the largest section in the orchestra outside of the strings. The standard configuration of a 19th century symphony is to have 4 horn parts, and we usually add a 5th player to play assistant. So we have 5 of us in the normal symphonic program. There are some composers who've called for double horn sections where we have 8, sometimes 9, even 10 horn players on stage at once. So it provides a lot of work for a lot of horn players when we have these pieces by Mahler, Stravinsky, or Bruckner that call for large horn sections. So as I mentioned, in the 19th century, the valves on brass instruments were invented, and let me explain the function of that. The open notes that I played before are fixed in place and determined by the length of the tubing, all the way from the mouthpiece to the exit at the bell. Now, to change the notes that are possible, you have to change the length of the tubing, and that's what the valves do. The valves add certain lengths of tubing that you can see on the top of the horn right here. Now, Let me play again some of the notes on the open horn without the vowels. Now if I want to go down a half step, I put the second vowel down and it adds this short length of tubing to the horn. Open. I want to go down a whole step, the first vowel. This length of tubing that is added with the first vowel is twice as long as the length of tubing that the second vowel adds. If I put them together, you get a step and a half down. First vowel, second vowel, open. So the various combinations of vowels give you all the notes in between the open notes. So you can play a chromatic scale easily. Just using the vowels. The third vowel is the equivalent of the first plus the second. And there are some combinations that require the third vowel, third with the second, third with first. You may have noticed on the back of my instrument I have a pencil clipped to the tubing. Every musician needs to have a pencil close at hand during rehearsal. The conductor will often give us directions on how to play a particular note, a particular passage, and it's very important that we notate in the music exactly what he or she wanted. She, in the case of Berkeley Symphony, of course. So we have this fancy new high-tech device that just clips a pencil to the back of the instrument for easy access. When I tell people that I'm a horn player, many people will say, "Oh, that's wonderful, that's my favorite instrument." And for many composers that may be true also. And perhaps that's because of the wide range of emotional expression capable of the instrument. Everything from heroic calls to the most lyrical, poetic passages. Let me demonstrate a couple of the extremes. The Siegfried horn call in Wagner's Ring cycle appears several times. I'll see if I can demonstrate that. Then, on the other hand, Brahms' Third Symphony has a beautiful melody that is very calming and relaxing. And then everything in between. So I hope you've enjoyed our little demonstration of the horn, and I hope you will enjoy all of our Berkeley Symphony concerts.